The most powerful voice in the SEC has spoken, and he says North Carolina will be in the SEC, perhaps sooner rather than later. And a Big 12 school might be part of the reason why. Yeah, this was interesting. Okay, follow me here. So Inside Carolina had the report that I would say kind of split people off in two directions last week. Some people read it and were kind of like, okay, we knew this because the report said North Carolina very much wants to be in the SEC, and they're at the front of the pack of ACC schools wanting to leave. Like, okay, I saw some sentiment of maybe that's some minor news that they would be at the front of the pack. Most people tend to think Florida State, maybe a Clemson there. But we know that North Carolina is the most coveted piece of realignment. It stands to reason that they would be highly motivated to move. The part that I found was interesting was it was talking about they might be so motivated that it would happen before 2030, which means that exit fee would be more than the $75 million that it drops to by that point, which was thought to be a huge win from the settlement. And so others were like, oh, wow. I mean, look, North Carolina getting out soon. Your aggregators, some of those social media accounts that want to make things go viral, they were all over it. And you saw the graphics like, oh, leaving for the SEC, all that. You knew that people like that would jump on it. But in all seriousness, I did think that part about 2030 was pretty interesting. Then you had Charleston, South Carolina Post and Courier's Scott Hamilton go on the Paul Feinbaum show. He said, hey, I think there's a gentleman's agreement in place for North Carolina to go to the SEC. So we're building this case, right? We're building this case. And Jim Phillips is sitting there like, bro, can we just not for like 2 seconds? We just got this settlement. And now we have Paul Feinbaum chiming in. Okay. And this isn't even on Feinbaum's show. These quotes come from McElroy and Kubelik in the morning. Another very SEC-centric, SEC-heavy show. But I will say, I guess this is the good news for Jim Phillips. The first part of this from Paul Feinbaum is that he sort of pours cold water on the idea that there is a gentleman's agreement already for them to join the SEC. He said, I think it's safe to know that anyone who is close to or has been around Greg Sankey knows this. He has not spoken formally or informally to anyone. That's not how he works. That's not how he's going to work, especially in light of what happened a couple of years ago. I guess I assume is that about Texas and Oklahoma and how quiet they kept that. Quote, it sounds very much to me like people close to North Carolina are floating this out there, probably frustrated with their current position, even though the ACC is now singing Kumbaya. So, I mean, a couple of things here. Like, okay, if you want to say Sankey has not directly or indirectly had those talks, fine. I don't know that that's always how it would work anyway, maybe a little bit more back channel than that, trying to cover your tracks. But it is a fair point that, I mean, Texas, Oklahoma was kept very, very silent until Brent Zorneman somehow pulled that out of almost thin air at SEC Media Days in 2021 in July. So, okay, I can get behind that, but I would also say there could be some semantics going on there and how exactly Feinbaum is phrasing that. But the more interesting part of the quote is, hey, North Carolina is floating this because they're frustrated with the ACC now singing Kumbaya. And that part really was like, oh, yeah, I probably should have had that thought before this. Like, of course, you're starting to see reporting from Carolina now coming out like, hey, we don't like this. I know that Jim Phillips is up here at ACC Media Days being like, hey, look, isn't this great? We've got stability. We don't have to worry about this. The sentiment from many in ACC countries, but we don't have to worry about this now for 5 years. And they're like, hey, to hell with that. Like, we may want to get out sooner. We still don't like this. Like, yes, John, you did a segment and said, wow, North Carolina, Florida State, Clemson, they come out like gangbusters because they get the exit fee lowered, and then they also get the brand initiatives, the success initiatives. They'll make more money. Like, yeah, that's all well and good, John, but that's not what we are here for. That is not our ultimate prize. That's child's play, and we're still upset that we're stuck in this damn conference when we want to be in the SEC. So let's float this out there. Let's make Jim Phillips' life a little bit more frustrating. Let's make it a little bit more difficult by going ahead and getting this out there, okay? We'll start to leak some of this and try and steal the headlines and kick back in the chaos meter for the ACC and not let anybody there feel comfortable. That makes a lot of sense to me, especially, I mean, you look at how ACC schools that want to get out have acted throughout this process. I mentioned Florida State. They were just doing the Let's get down in the mud and sling it around, baby, as much as we can. When the lawsuit started, that was their attitude. They do not care. They don't give a you-know-what. And that seems to be what North Carolina is doing here. Okay. But okay, how does the Big 12 get involved here? How does the Big 12 get involved here? Here's another quote from Paul Feinbaum. He says, quote, "We all know there are a lot of anxious schools there. I've said all that as a preamble to say that I think ultimately it's going to happen. I took a long way to get to it, but I think once we get to this next iteration, North Carolina has always been the number one choice of many people in SEC circles. I think the bigger question is, when exactly does it happen? And secondly, who would their drafting partner be?" So I don't think that this is really like a poorly kept secret that Carolina is the biggest prize in conference realignment outside of Notre Dame, and that the SEC would be the most likely landing spot for them. But there's Paul Feinbaum reinforcing that and saying that. But I mentioned Greg McElroy, right? This occurs on his show when he's interviewing Paul Feinbaum. Here's what he said. Quote, "It kind of checks out, Paul. Every single time a team hires a superstar head coach, they seem to be on the move. Colorado is an example. A splashy head coach, they seem to be on the move. Texas hiring Sarkisian. These are not really that uncommon," McElroy explained. "You can kind of connect the dots back. Bill Belichick now being at North Carolina makes you feel like, you know what? There might be something to this." That, my friends, is how you do sports radio. Let me just say, I don't really agree with that take, but that is a great take to be very interesting and evocative, if not provocative, on a sports radio show. So I've got to give it to Greg McElroy. Obviously, the guy can play quarterback. Apparently, he has learned very well how to do radio too. I applaud that as a sports radio take. Yes, it is circumstantially correct that, Texas hired Sark in January of 2021. They are gone. At least the announcement comes that they're gone to the SEC by July 2021. Colorado hires Coach Prime. A year later, they're off to the Big 12. I get how the timing looks there. I just would say, I don't know that was like specifically, especially Texas. Like, was Texas like, hey, we're going to the SEC. We need the splashiest hire we can get. So we're going to hire Steve Sarkisian? At the time, I don't think that was like people thought. I certainly didn't think it was a slam dunk that Sark was going to be a dude as a head coach. I think that was Texas being like, well, we need to hire a better coach. And we have, honestly, it felt a little bit to me like we've done the super duper splashy, sexy name back-to-back times, and Tom Herman and Charlie Strong. It hasn't really suited us very well. It hasn't worked out. Let's go get who we think is like the best ball coach here. And they got a guy who's a complete stud in terms of drawing up an offense. And it's worked out pretty well with Sark. I don't know that I would tie that directly to, hey, this is an SEC hire. We got to go make an SEC hire. It was, no, we have been mediocre for 15 years and we're freaking Texas. We just got valued at over $2 billion by The Athletic. Like, we can't let our program continue to be 7-5 every year and not making the Big 12 championship game. That to me is what it felt like more of from Texas at the time. And Colorado, it was just, hey, we are desolate, man. We are desolate. We are the worst Power 5 football program out there. We need to go hire somebody. We need some juice in the program. Like, not just do we need to win games, but like, it's not only a bad program, it's just like a boring program. Like, what? There was no identity to Colorado football at all when they made that hire. So I would disagree with the notion that, like, hey, Big 12 kind of like influenced the idea here for North Carolina to go get Bill Belichick and then take off to the SEC. I kind of push back against that, but it's, as I said, a very interesting take to throw at that. Very, very interesting. If you want to, honestly, of the three, if you wanted to make a take of the three that, hey, Bill Belichick to North Carolina was the most representative of those three that, like, hey, they're trying to get out. They're trying to go bigger and get to a different league, like level themselves up. I would listen to that maybe a little bit more, especially because like some of the smoke had already been out there for the ACC by the time they even made the Belichick hire. Now, I'm seeing some of you in the chat like dispute, hey, Bill Belichick is not a big-time hire. Like, don't call Bill. Look, I am very skeptical of how Belichick will work out at this level. unless Tom Brady is walking through that door with some kind of extra eligibility as North Carolina's quarterback, which, the way people are suing the NCAA these days, maybe it's worth a shot. But I don't think that's happening. So I don't know how good of a coach Belichick will actually be. I don't know how that'll translate to the college level. And there's that Jordan Hudson thing going on too that makes you wonder about where exactly his head is at right now. So I have plenty of skepticism, a healthy amount of skepticism there. But I do think it's fair to say it's a hire of North Carolina, like trying to make a splash and trying to level themselves up. So in the context of this, I think it works. I don't think that this is a real general trend that you see coaches making, like a quote unquote SEC hire here to try and get up into the SEC, or that Dion was like a Big 12 hire. Not buying that. But I think it is safe to say in all of this, like there's been a wave of Carolina smoke that Big 12 influence or not, whether or not it's about Belichick, it does seem very clear. Carolina wants out, and they want out soon, and they want people to know they may not just wait until 2030. It may be much sooner than that. And the leaks, wherever the stories are coming from, especially because it's coming from inside Carolina, like team site, you think that's someone that's going to be plugged in all likelihood with people on the Carolina side of it, makes me really think that there's something to what Feinbaum said about all of that. So if you are an ACC fan, I would not rest right now. It seems pretty tenuous, and this is the dichotomy of the ACC, man. It's the dichotomy. They do have some really nice brands between Florida State, Clemson, Miami, North Carolina. There are some nice brands in the ACC, but there is not stability. There is no stability, and that's how do you weigh that in the conference hierarchy? How do you weigh that, man? It's a tough one.